And when we're talking about communication, we have to understand that communication itself is kind of messy. And understanding how it works in a general sense as a model is kind of important to moving forward with any discipline. Communication essentials. Communication happens between people. And the basic models that the discipline has established is one of message transfer, or message exchange, or message creation. Now, message transfer is one message discreetly going to a receiver. Simple point-to-point transmission and reception of a discrete message. There's something very simple in this. It is, if you can imagine, you coming into a classroom and finding a sign that says no class. Your perception there is going to be that, okay, this sign taped to the door generally means that there is no class today, I have a free period. That is a message transfer. This is a relatively elemental model of communication. The next model is message exchange, where there are two actors really. Instead of you and a sign, there is suddenly a communication among two different, theoretically, people. And this is message delivery occurs within context and prompts feedback. That means that there are extenuating circumstances. There are two people involved in the process here. One person is going to sit there and, let's say, nod or agree. Let's say after that initial sign, another person comes up to the classroom, finds the sign and the person, and looks to the person first standing in front of the door with the sign, and that person who has just been there looks to the second person and says, no class. There's no class today, and the other person just sort of nods and says, oh, okay, fine. That's feedback. It has a social contextualization. The third model that scholars have identified is a little bit more complicated and probably a little more closer to the mark of what you and I are used to on a regular basis in terms of communicating. And that is message creation, where two participants participate in the creation of meaning. Co-creation of meaning, equally subject to noise, feedback, and misinterpretation. It is a more transactional model. So two people come together and figure out how or what the meaning of something is, and they figure it out in a kind of dialogue. The example here might be that, well, let's say the same classroom issue comes up. One person comes up to another and says, no class. And then the second person says, yeah, I agree, he's really crude, meaning the teacher. Which is a rewrite of an old Rodney Dangerfield joke, quite frankly. But what it shows is that these two people are taking different understandings of the same basic stimuli, same basic stimulus. Well, stimuli because it's multivariable in its context, and creating something new. And they're creating this little moment, and that moment has meaning beyond what the initial literal meaning of that sign, no class, would be. It is a much more complicated, a much more rich, much more prone to misunderstanding and misinterpretation. And so this is why it tends to be one of the more realistic models of communication, because as human beings we are notoriously faulty and notoriously chaotic in the way we get our thoughts across. So human communication in any form needs to be understood, that it has different aspects of it, different complications within it. There is an original intention, perhaps, not necessarily. There is an original understanding, perhaps, but not necessarily. There is very often misunderstanding. There is surrounding noise, other factors that are bearing in, that are suddenly making things complicated. There is body language, how you stand and what you do with your hands when you're speaking has meaning and can cloud the meaning of what you're saying. Verbal tone, obviously, when you say something really snarky like that has meaning, and that will cloud the interpretation of what you're actually saying. So if you were to write something down, it would mean one thing, but if you were to say that same phrase, that same communication, that same message with a little snark in it, or maybe a little upspeak at the end, no class, it changes. There's something different. Historical context, when different people have, or when different situations have occurred that are in the background of the participants in the Communication Act, and so they're thinking, well, the last time we came here and we got this message, it meant one thing, but another time it meant another, and what does it mean? And all of these things bear down, and this, of course, locks communication in a sense of time and place. Context is important. It can change what something means, and of course, that leads to the consideration of other people within that. So they have psychological dynamics. Different people are going to interpret things different ways. Some people are going to interpret a message, they're naturally defensive, so they might interpret a message as somehow an attack, or wonder about the motives of the person offering the message. Other people might say that, well, maybe it's a come on. Maybe I think I'm so darn irresistible, everybody's going to be sitting there flirting with me. So even the most harmless message takes on social sexual connotations, let's say. All of this feeds into, as well, a kind of relational dynamics, how we are used to getting along with certain people, how we are used to getting along with strangers, and these all have meaning as well, and complicate any notion of a literal meaning to communication. So as we begin our study of communication, bear all of this in mind. This is a very complicated subject. This is a very difficult thing to understand if you're too rigid in how you understand. Well, communication, yeah, I say this, you should understand that. I'm speaking English, you're understanding English. What's the problem? Well, it's not that complicated, or it's not that simple, rather. It is that complicated. There are factors that we all need to take into consideration, and this isn't just a matter of, well, you know, he said, she said, personal dynamics, you know, they should know what I mean. The onus is on you in certain contexts to make it clear and to control all of these other factors as much as you possibly can, and understand what you cannot control, and try and allow for that within an understanding. Because this is what, to bring it back down to dollars and cents, quite frankly, this is what it means to be a professional in the world today. This is what it means to have, this is what it means to be able to operate in an office in a professional and promotable manner. If you just expect everybody to catch up with your way of expressing yourself, and to hell with them if they can't, well, that's just great. But you can't expect much advancement in that organization. Understand the possibilities, understand the limitations, understand the expertise that comes with the human ability to express oneself. Understand that, and you have power in this world.